I'm gonna find a way to get us out of here.
No one gets out of these places!
What exactly is going on up there?
I'll tell you this, the ones that are going up there are coming back.
What extreme lengths would a brother choose to save his sister? Under Jeff Bueller's direction, Insanitarium is a 2008 horror thriller film that took the audience on a terrifying journey through an evil mental institution. The film stars Jesse Metcalfe as Jack, a desperate brother willing to go to extreme lengths to save his sister Lily, played by Kila Sanchez, from a mad doctor who mercilessly experiments on his patients and turns them into bloodthirsty killers. Can Jack get to his sister in time? The movie kicks off with Jack writing a letter to explain his plan to fake insanity and get committed to the same asylum where his sister's held. Lily's struggled mentally since their mother's death and attempted suicide, so Jack feels desperate to save her. He writes the letter as an insurance policy detailing his intentions in case anything goes wrong. So how does he get it? By wounding himself, cutting his hair unevenly, and breaking a mirror to appear insane. Soon he takes to the streets, shirtless and yelling about monsters, intentionally crashing into people and cursing loudly. This behaviour gets him arrested and sedated, finally landing him in the asylum. Upon arrival at the asylum, Jack opens his eyes to see Charles, a guard played by Kevin Sussman, who transports him on a stretcher to meet the institution's sinister head, Dr. Giannetti. Peter Stormare's portrayal of Dr. Giannetti is chilling as he exhibits a cold attitude. Still focused on his initial mission, Jack pushes through the sedatives and continues to act irrationally. Observing this unstable nature, Giannetti assigns him to maximum security. In the maximum security wing, Charles chains Jack in a cell, alerting him about his dangerous neighbour, Mark, who killed many girls and kept their bodies. Afterwards, when Charles leaves, he notices Mark vomiting blood and enters the cell to assist him. After noticing Mark holding a blade, Jack warns Charles about it and saves his life. This act of humanity earns him Mark's anger. The next phase of Jack's trouble came after Charles transported him into the psychiatric ward with Dr. Giannetti's approval. This is where he meets the strict nurse Nancy, played by Olivia Munn. Soon, Jack makes the mistake of approaching a woman that he thinks is Lily, but it turns out to be Heather, a patient played by Carla Gallo. Appearing calm at first, Heather quickly causes concern by shouting. She calms down after Nancy intervenes. Later in the ward, Jack encounters Loomis, a volatile patient who starts to choke Nancy. Jack was feeling helpless when another patient, Dave, played by Armin Shimmerman, quickly helped Jack call for help with a panic button. Shortly after, Giannetti arrives and calms Loomis with a few words, followed by Charles securing him in the upstairs cell. Jack's plan for rescuing his sister has turned into a severe struggle for survival now. In an attempt to escape from his room, Jack checks the room when he finds Dave hiding. Dave explains that he wanted to ensure that Jack wasn't crazy-eyed. Jack soon learns that Giannetti's conducting unethical experiments on the patients using a drug called orphium, transforming patients into violent, flesh-eating creatures. In the lab, Dr. Giannetti subjects Loomis to electric shocks until his mouth foams, displaying a disturbing lack of empathy. Vera, Giannetti's assistant, played by Melissa Hale, turns off the machine, scolding him for going too far. After dismissing Ver's warning, Giannetti snaps, injecting Loomis with orphium and making his eyes turn white. The following day, Jack finally sees Lily in the garden and rushes to meet her. Their reunion is emotional but tense. Lily scolds Jack for coming, insisting that she doesn't want to be saved, insisting that she's as sick as their mother was. Their argument draws attention, and a nurse sends Lily back to her room. Heather had been silently observing this interaction. Later in the cafeteria, Jack discreetly takes a spoon, intending to use it for an escape attempt. Soon, Heather approaches him, asking about Lily and inviting him to a room that evening. Jack declines and ignores her subsequent yelling. He sits with Dave, and soon Charles joins them, reminding Dave of their deal to steal medicine if he doesn't want to be reported. After Charles leaves, Dave asks Jack to keep his secret, offering to keep Jack's sanity a secret in return. That night, Charles forces Heather into sex, which becomes a regular occurrence that keeps her quiet under threat. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jack attempts to use the spoon to remove parts of his bed and tries to open a window in his room. He falls and ends up cutting his hand. During group therapy the next day, Jack's open wound starts to bleed onto the floor. Loomis attacks Jack while other patients get agitated by the sight of blood. Soon, the nurse present attempts to restore order but is attacked by Loomis. Finally, Charles arrives and initiates another lockdown. Soon, Jack's desperation to uncover the truth about orphium leads him to request a meeting with Dr. Giannetti. He asks the doctor to retrieve his letter from his apartment, but when the letter's found, it's blank except for a few words. Jack accuses Giannetti of playing a trick on him, insisting that he isn't crazy. Giannetti orders Charles to take Jack back to maximum security, where Mark's been patiently waiting for revenge. Hours later, when Janetti checks on him, Jack resumes his act, apologising for his behaviour earlier. Janetti's satisfied and allows Jack to return to the psychiatric ward. That afternoon, Jack convinces Dave to teach him how to sneak around the asylum, hoping to investigate Orpheum. Soon, Dave helps Jack enter an office without being noticed. He then breaks into and explores the solitary ward, checking windows and encountering various patients, each more deranged than the last. And finally, Jack finds Lily. Afraid of Janetti, she begs Jack to help her. Hearing Charles approaching, Jack runs through corridors, eventually reaching Janetti's lab, where he finds Loomis caged. Jack steals a bottle of Orpheum and a scalpel, then hides as Janetti and Vera enter the lab. There, Janetti's sadistic nature is further revealed when he assaults Vera, making a cut on her leg and forcing himself upon her. The next day in the cafeteria, an inmate with white eyes attacks Dave. However, Jack intervenes and is saved by Charles, arriving just in time to tase the attacker. With growing concerns, the next morning Jack demands to see Lily, but the nurse tells him that she's upstairs with Janetti, upsetting him. He threatens her after noticing her white eyes. This makes Nancy lock him up in his room. Meanwhile, when Vera brings food to the maximum security patients, Mark expresses his preference for live food. Horrifying, right? Later that night, Dave and Jack manage to find Lily tied in the lab upstairs, but they're noticed by Janetti, who is treating Vera's infectious bite from Loomis. Desperately, he tries to contact Charles, who's sleeping in Heather's room, but she's hidden his radio. Jack and Dave finally cross the maximum security hallway. Mark offers to join them, but Jack refuses. But things soon get out of hand when Janetti short-circuits the electricity, which opens the maximum security doors. Jack and Dave fight off the now freed violent patients, managing to reach the lab just in time to lock the door behind them. In the lab, they untie Lily and begin to walk back through the hallway. Another fight with patients befalls them. However, they manage to escape the situation with Nancy's help and end up finding Vera in a room. She mentions a hidden passage that leads to the roof before asking to be euthanized. Afterwards, during the daring struggle to escape, they fight off many others, including Heather the nurse, and sadly losing Nancy to a bite from a patient. But the most terrifying fight was with Janetti, who attacks Dave using an ice pick, leaving him brain dead. Eventually, Jack and Lily manage to overpower Janetti and tase him unconscious. They tie Janetti to Loomis's cage, leaving the mad scientist to his deserving fate as Loomis begins to feed on him. Well, what do they do next? Using up all of their energy, they continue their escape, and by morning, they'd finally reached the road. Exhausted and traumatized, they're discovered by the police. The police hear the story and drive them back to the asylum. The police are greeted by an unharmed Janetti opening the door. He unleashes infected patients, killing the officers. The movie ends on an even more terrifying note, with Jack and Lily watching in horror inside the police car as the infected patients, now loose and uncontrollable, run wild into the surrounding area, ignoring Janetti, yelling that he can help them. So, what makes this movie so great? The movie's made a significant mark in the horror genre, particularly among fans who appreciate intense bloodshed and psychological thrills. Not just that, without even having a theatrical release, its direct-to-video status didn't stop it from gaining a cult following. One of the standout features of Insanitarium is its commitment to practical effects. The film's gore is both intense and realistic, thanks to the special effects team that previously worked on Midnight Meat Train. Nearly all the effects were achieved using prosthetics and practical techniques, which lends an old-school authenticity to the film over the modern CGI effects. And what about Peter Stormare's performance? His portrayal of the Mad Doctor is both unsettling and compelling, adding a significant creep factor to the film. And how about from a moral perspective? The beginning itself just glues down the viewers, especially with the emotional factor, which is a brother sacrificing his life for the only family bond he's left with, his sister. The movie also touches on the consequences of unchecked power and authority within institutions. And that's it in a nutshell. Now it's time to hear your thoughts. Comment them down below, like and subscribe for more.